Still haven't
Do
figured
that
out.
co-host thing again.
Yes, the privileges are weird. I don't understand. And if we can please have our transcript in Espanol, that would be great.
Yes, of course.
All right, cool. All right. So start with application window and okay. I don't know why this seems so foreign to me, but okay, infinite windows. Okay. Is it the right window now? Does it switch between tabs at least?
We see canvas.
Okay, cool. Good that you see canvas. Okay, so today we're looking at storytelling and level of detail in immersive content. I didn't do our typical slide presentation because I thought we've done quite a bit of work on narrative throughout the course of your studies. We've constantly delved into narrative arcs and beats and when things need to happen, how to tell stories, even though it's not even like typically an animator or a game designer um, or a motion graphics artist's job description to come up with unique stories and original content. We like to embrace original content and give you the opportunity to tell stories because I think it's in any case in everyone's not only best interest but sort of nature to want to convey information and tell stories in their own way. And we all want to be creative. Even people that aren't necessarily in the creative field have creative outlet. So this obsession with narrative within animation and film is just to allow us to make sense. And I think that's even what stories have done over millennia, is for us to convey information in ways that we can absorb and remember as well, things that aren't as concrete. So narrative, even like people that have to memorize a lot of information, do so using narrative and pinpointing elements within a sort of a construct, a linear construct. Apparently, on a side note, the more abstract or the more absurd those notions are that you link ideas with, the better you remember it. So if you take that into account, then the more original your story is, the more it's going to stand out from the rest, or the more memorable it'll be, and the more it'll stick with the audience. So one of these things that stuck with me for like the first time I saw it, that was sort of based on narrative, but mostly because of its immersive content, was the Mars rover experience. So at the time we were doing, sorry, I'm jumping right down to the bottom, because it was the first time that I experienced something like that um, the in the browser. It was also the first time, I think, it was just the right sort of content and timing. It was when the Mars rover first went up. It was really a big deal. First time landing on Mars, first time receiving footage from the strange planet, from the surface of the strange planet. So there was a lot of hype around it. So the timing, which is often what we call, or what we refer to as a zeitgeist, like the spirit of the time, whatever is in the spirit of the time, you'll often find that a lot of sort of narrative devices like games and films and even advertising, for that matter, would jump on the bandwagon. Everyone will kind of get on board and everything will be kind of like space themed, or, you know, when there's a sort of a pandemic breaking out or something, then everything's zombie themed all of a sudden. So you'll find that like narratives often sort of follow these trends as well over time. And I think that, and on top of this, new technology really made the experience very memorable. So back in the day, I think this was it's probably about 10 years ago now. When did Mars rover land for the first time? It was quite groundbreaking for the technology that we see here. This is, as you can see in the browser, it is immersive content to the extent that you're in charge and you're right there, and you're observing the environment around you. Another thing that stood out for me is how effectively this medium conveyed information. So it almost becomes second, or it taps in with our natural way of experiencing the world around us, like having a closer look at something or picking at something if you want to know more. Now, if you were younger, you would also put it in your mouth to know more about it, but we don't do that anymore. When you grow older, you try and observe with your visual senses mostly, and then to some extent we feel a lot. It's not necessarily as tangible as the visual, but we get a sense of the context of what we're looking at through audio. So there's also these really interesting experiments where they take the same footage and they just edit it to different audio, or they just actually overlay different audio tracks onto it. And then it gives it an entirely different mood and conveys a different narrative entirely. So I think for immersive content, it's really important that you take both into consideration, but also like, what is this content good at doing, and what is different from how we tell conventional stories. So for me, what was really interesting about this medium, first off the bat, is that you can look for information. You can search, whereas films often give you a very two-dimensional kind of frame to look at, and whatever is happening in that composition is very deliberate. It's meant to draw your attention to a specific element, beyond the fact that the camera is already pointing at that element, and that it is good for cinematographers and directors and storytellers in general to lead the viewer's eye. You don't want them fumbling around and looking for answers while watching a film. That issue of leading the viewer's eye is significantly exasperated. It's worse. It's so much more difficult doing that in VR because there's so much more to contend with. Because now people are left to their own device. They're allowed to explore. The medium encourages exploration, which makes it a really good teaching tool. And because it's so easy to adopt, or so natural, a natural extension of our observational skills, it's really difficult to get the viewer to look at what you want them to look at. So I think that is the main challenge that we're going to face when addressing narrative in this format. Okay, so there's some cool stuff that you can do. You can drive around with the rover. You can zoom in and out and look. Like, it was really groundbreaking for what it was. This coincidentally was all done in, so this doesn't actually use any footage as far as I know. It's actual 3D. This little camera arm thingy is freaking out a little bit. But you can do quite a bit in here, looking at different bits of information, little annotations. And sorry, I was saying it was done in Blend for Web, which is a very strange tool that used to be built on Blender's game engine. For those of you that may or may not recall, way back when Blender had a game engine integrated into it, and you could use that to create basically interactive, what was it converted to? JavaScript? Yeah, JavaScript, I think. So it packages all these Blender files in like little bins that the JavaScript can then use to navigate or recall to navigate in the browser, which is quite cool. Okay, so we did an exercise like that, interactive learning content, and it was always a little bit of a challenge to direct the viewer. In fact, I think the training content that we did, we literally just clamped the direction that you can look at. Annotations is a good way of engaging with this as well. And you'll see perhaps from the narrative examples that we look at, the different ways that you can lead the eye. So just browsing the web and looking for this content, because I recalled it, seeing it way back when, I also came across something that I thought was that originally, called This Visit to Mars. So it wasn't nearly as good, but it was also kind of interesting how they portrayed the information and laid out the information within this space. So I'm just going to mute it. You can see it's nicely sort of layered, some rendered elements. It's not interactive, and you can obviously deviate from the plan and miss the entire point. I feel like this is what my teenage son is going to be looking at when they're doing educational content in VR. But you can use clues and elements and things to drive you towards the information once again. When it's interactive, of course, you can set up triggers so that things only happen when the viewer is actually looking at it. But we unfortunately don't have that luxury. And you can see from even just the basic navigation in within YouTube, you still have quite a bit of real estate when it comes to zooming into this content. Okay, so there's a number of things that we need to have a look at here. Our maximum resolution is 8K. I'm currently looking at this in 4K. So can push it, and then we can kind of ascertain the amount of detail that we need for our scenes if we were to render 8K videos. $8K is quite a chunky piece of footage. But that holds up quite decently on, this is a Retina display. And you can see a little bit of pixelation, but I think that might actually just be compression from YouTube. Okay, so now we kind of know where am I? Oh, now I'm on the rover thing again. How did I get here? Oh, it ends with that, sorry. Okay. I didn't see this part originally. Okay, so we kind of know what we're capable of doing when we don't have the ability to navigate the space in any other way. We've got orbiting, and we've got zooming to some extent. Anything else that happens in the world, and you might notice it over here, that the video kind of went through a transition. Anything else needs to pretty much be pre-rendered. If you want the camera to move in a specific direction, you need to choose that. There's also a number of different ways of exporting this content. So let's say you've now generated content that kind of looks like this, or fits the format. So it's 4K, wraps all around, it's seamless. However you generated it, there's a number of ways that you could still treat that and change it into sort of a different perspective that might not make it immersive, but kind of still uses the 360 format to its advantage. So I'll show you that on the iPad, because the first time that I encountered this was actually through the device that the school purchased. So it's this tiny little 360 cam. It's called the Insta360 2X. You'll see it all over, or X2. You'll see it all over the internet. This is the sort of 360 standard, I'd say. And with the capabilities of the device itself, they've enabled a whole bunch of different algorithms, if you will, to interpret this footage and wrap it in different ways, which is kind of what you would have seen if you saw this. I don't think that was 360 in the end. But it then outputs a number of different formats. So I can show you, maybe these will spark some ideas. Okay, I might just need to take a step back and share my entire screen, sorry. Okay, and then let me just reactivate that. Okay. So you should be seeing an iPad interface now. Please unmute yourself if you don't, because I can't see the screen. Hopefully that's working. And then this is the interface for the 360 camera. Normally the little yellow button at the bottom, that will allow you to connect directly with the camera, so you can see whatever's happening on there. You can shoot through that as well. You can edit in here, which is their story feature. And then they have what they call the sort of flash cut, but it's essentially tutorials on how to achieve different effects using a 360 camera. Some of the movement that you might see in the camera itself is just, that's fake. So that's just compiled afterwards. Like this clone loop at the bottom here, that's obviously just a camera on a tripod and a person performing the action over and over again, or just cut out pieces of the character doing it over and over again. We can look at other examples. Sky swap is not as... there's some really impressive stuff that you can do, like removing clone trails, time lapse. the one where they remove all the people from the busy street was like pretty amazing. Split jumps, spin around. In this example, the Cine time lapse at the bottom, you kind of get a sense that the camera is flying, except most of the spinning actions are just, once again, it's just post-animated. So you still have the ability, even though you're going down a straight line, to go and predefine certain camera maneuvers. This is tracking the characters, and then they have these preset VFX elements that you can just add on top. So that's not super impressive. Sky Swap is a matting tool, so that's also not. I'm trying to navigate it with my mouse. Sorry. Where is the removal? Crowd removal. Seems like some of these are struggling to load. Let me just see what's going on here. Okay, I clicked one, expecting it to open. Try that again. Nose mode. Okay, there you go. This is also quite basic. Sorry, none of these seem to want to open. Might just be my internet. Okay. I'll show you next week because we'll have the device hands-on and then you can go and try it out. But essentially, this helps just sort of imagine the different views or perspectives that you can get from the same footage. So the principle is that instead of, so you're shooting in all directions all at once, right? So you have a cube map essentially, but you could choose how you want to view that cube map. You can either view it from like the top perspective, like they've done here. So that's almost an orthographic top view where the rest of the panels kind of shrink and converge, and you have this spherical planet kind of view. That's kind of what's happening with the nose view as well, where the guy just pushes it into his mouth. Time lapse, it's just a feature of the camera, but I mean, that's it's also something that you can just do by shooting a lot of footage and then speeding it up. The removal of all the elements in the shot, so shooting clean plates, is very useful for HDRIs. So someone going and doing like a VFX shoot, and then afterwards having to light and recomposite 3D elements into that shot, having an HDRI to actually reintroduce the lighting from the scene onto your VFX objects is very useful. So if you're ever on a VFX shoot, it's very cool to have a 360 camera at hand. Trying to think of anything that stands out in terms of the algorithms that they could or that they've implemented. But okay, we'll get back to that. Right, so then just stop sharing this again, in and out. Okay, so this is a more traditional approach to storytelling in an immersive environment. And it actually won an Emmy Award in 2017. It's called Invasion. It's a cute little animation. And bear with me as I clumsily navigate this 360 space. And if you have any suggestions in terms of what I should be looking at or where I should go, now if you remember, yes, I'm really giving away my age today, but there was a thing called KTV. And on KTV, you could win prizes if you played a game. You played Sonic the Hedgehog remotely, and then you'd have to tell the person like when to jump and when to roll and when to sprint. And then based on that person's response to your voice actions, you could win a certain amount of prizes, which seemed awfully unfair because half the time the person doesn't actually respond to what you're saying and they're just trying to play the game. And the timing also needs to be quite spot on. So I don't think it was very successful. But anyway, if you want me to look left or look right or down or up, just prompt me and let me know.
We don't hear any audio.
What? Why can't you hear any audio?
Max. They don't like sharing audio.
Can't be. Let me try again. Share tab, yeah, probably. Okay. This should work. Yes?
Across the gulf of space.
Yes.
Minds that are to our minds as ours are to the meekest and most vulnerable beasts that easily perish on Earth. Intellects, vast and cool and unsympathetic, regarded our planet with envious eyes, and slowly and surely drew their plans against us.
That light, I suppose, was the clue for me to look at this direction. Something happening over there. Oops, didn't mean to pause.
There are those who say that one day the meek shall inherit the earth. Until that day arrives, the meek will be defending it.
So it pretty much just carries on like that. But there are instances, I think, where they've done it, done a good job. I think sort of directing the viewer to a point of interest, like when the bunny ran up to the, sort of made a sound in the distance and then drew your attention and then ran up to the sort of up to the camera. And is in full frame, and then the way that they animated the spaceship coming around, but there are still portions of the animation that doesn't really use the medium for its or to its full extent, in my mind at least. So there are plenty of other examples like this. What I just want to point out today is maybe the different approaches that you could take. And then I want to have a discussion in terms of your ideas that you came up with last week. Some of you mentioned certain platforms that you wanted to target. And then I don't know if we completely heard from everyone. I think everyone might have heard from everyone in their individual groups. But if your idea at all changed or grew or kind of like developed into something else, or perhaps different software or tools have enabled or sparked a new idea, then that's what we want to hear from you today. So first, we want to show you a few more kind of like technical approaches, how one would go about rendering 360 footage from Blender, for instance, or After Effects for that matter, or even do something like this in Unity. And then maybe after that, you could decide for yourself, okay, well, this is the type of medium that I want to work in. This is probably the approach that I would take if I had to make immersive content. This is a platform that I think it would work on. And these are the sort of narrative elements that I think I'm going to work with, whether it's sort of just abstract graphics or character animation or things that I have completed before that I could repurpose and use for this assignment. Now, I did see a note there in the chat about the brief. Just remember that this is a theoretical component to your major. So it doesn't have an outcome other than your major's outcome. But what we'd like to see in your portfolio at the end of the year is something that taps into the use of immersive technology. So either you've taken something that you've made already and you've rendered it out in 4K to wrap around and be displayed in VR, or perhaps you've shot something and composited on that as an exercise, or built a scene that you can simply explore and navigate using 360 pre-rendered footage. Anything will do, really. So there's no strict brief. There's no strict outcome other than exploring the medium for yourself. Obviously, the more you can do with it, the better for your portfolio and the better for the outcome of this exercise and this theoretical exercise in any case. So I hope that makes sense. We did consider creating an assignment at the end of the term so that we can just sort of collate anything that you've worked on and maybe give you some advice before your final portfolio presentation. But these marks are actually just attributed to your major. So they form part of that evaluation process. And that's why they're sort of semester-based. You'll have a media aesthetics mark for semester 1, and you'll have a media aesthetic mark for semester 2, based on how well you've integrated the information that was shared with you, and whether or not there's evidence of the design processes that we've covered in your final portfolio. So for last term, we looked at concept development. So any concept sketches, any storyboards, anything that attributed to the development and the concept ideation process was evaluated. And then in term 2, it was literally it was aligned with the pre-visualization. So if you had pre-visualization, a lot of the content that went into your, or let's say was attributed to your media aesthetic mark, came from the pre-visualization. And then I think the game students that didn't have pre-visualization did prototypes and what was it, alpha releases, which is early versions of their game and tastes of what the game would look like. It's also a form of pre-visualization, and that's where those marks for media aesthetics came from. It's almost like an applied theory. Does that make sense? Hog Rider VR. I'll have to check that out. Cool. Okay, here I am swapping presentations again. I'm gonna stop sharing my face while doing technical tutorials because I normally just look like this, trying to figure out what button I'm supposed to press next. So, bye. All right, so I looked into a couple of solutions. Firstly, if you just sort of download, sorry, there's a bunch of download type stuff. Where does it go? Oh, I moved it. Okay, so let me just go to my projects. So I dropped some footage that I took using the, what do you call it? The Insta360, so 360 camera. And this was old footage. It was a, what is it? Not grappling. Wall climbing. It's got a different word. I don't do it that often. And I know there's one that just opened in Centurion as well. I think I tried it for the first time in Berlin. So this was just a photograph from there. And then I also grabbed some of the footage that was on there, just walking through the forest. So this looks very strange. And there's not much that you can do with this because you can see that there's quite a bit of stretching and banding and whatnot happening. It's very strange. To look and work with this content, like how would you go about even like adding anything to this? Okay, so luckily, compositing software can do that, right? So the way that it's rendered is essentially meant to be mapped onto a cylinder or a sphere or a cube that projects it inwards and closes all these seams, typically a sphere. Okay, so in its raw format, it looks like this. And then when you import it, I linked a few tutorials over here to how to work with VR tools in After Effects. So this first one, please do excuse me because I like referring to the sources and try and get the content straight from the horse's mouth, so to speak. Immersive content in Adobe After Effects works in quite a strange way because it basically creates all these pre-comps and tools to view it as if you're seeing it in VR. Okay, so to make a long story short, if you actually, I can just trash all of this for now or just start a new one and grab that footage. So the video footage or the image footage. Video footage on a tripod would obviously be very similar to just a standard image. But even if it's a still, you could still navigate it as if it was a video. So that doesn't, and obviously because it's After Effects, you can just animate on top of that still. The only thing that you lose when not shooting footage is the sort of smaller movements that you might pick up in things like, branches moving or people moving in the frame. But if you just want a clear plate of something like this, that's just like kind of underground basement kind of area, you wouldn't have you in the frame. This wasn't what it was meant for. So you might just need to plan a little bit better and shoot something that's interesting and still has the possibility of being animated without giving away the gig, so to speak. Okay. So if you just open the footage by default, it doesn't really change in any way. You need to use this sort of VR comp editor tool that you'll find under Windows, VR comp editor. So once you open that, it will look for a composition that already has footage in it. So you'd need to create a composition. So either from the still or from the moving image footage, just create a composition equal to the size of the footage. Close the footage window. And once again, you can't really see anything different yet. But the moment that you activate this add 3D edit, so in other words, you're editing to the footage as a pre-projected object. So that's what 3D edit means. 2D edit means that you're editing on the 2D plane, but what's weird about it is like if you navigate away from it, then that doesn't actually follow it. So I don't know what the purpose of that is, really, especially working. I suppose if you've locked down your camera already, then that would make sense. Otherwise, add 2D edit, and then we can just decide on which one we want to use, because I've made both of them now. I'll use the image first, and then your comp width, and you can change the aspect ratio or whatever here. Normally footage exported in this way is 2:1. So it's closer to 16:8 actually, for it to be the true aspect ratio. But I think this is just a comp export, so that doesn't matter. The footage itself, I think, is, let me just double check. Composition settings. Yeah, so it's 2:1. Okay, so whenever you render the raw footage, you need to remember that everything needs to be 2:1. It's basically a square frame per eyeball. No, I don't know if that makes sense. Okay, you have the option to add nulls here and center the camera, add 3D plugins. I think if you use the Cinema 4D add-on, then you want to tick that, and then you can do 3D text and things in your scene. And that's obviously if you've shot anything on alpha. I don't know how you would, I suppose you could generate alphas and then re-import it. Or if you rendered in Blender beforehand, then you would have an alpha, and then it will take that into consideration. Okay, so then in this instance, it's made a VR comp now that has a VR master camera and a VR master camera controller, which is the null. Essentially, you could animate the null to pre-animate the direction of the camera. Okay, so if you wanted the camera to look in this direction, originally, you know how After Effects works, basically key it, and then after a while, look in a different direction. You can do that, right? So you could dictate the direction of the camera on the pre-rendered footage. So if something was happening there, you could do that. Except the difference is, though, that if you weren't originally looking in that direction, then that move will still occur, but might not look at the right thing. So it's not always good to force camera look at, and it's normally better to suggest. And that's where the sort of suggested cues for the narrative comes in. You kind of have to lead the viewer in that direction. You can use C to just orbit around and look around, but this doesn't actually change the camera because the camera is still parented to the null over there. And like I said, that same action will now occur, but it's actually just somewhere else that doesn't make sense anymore. To comp stuff in, of course, you don't do that in the VR comp itself. It's easier to work with the flat composition. So you'll return to the composition where you have all your footage or images here at once. And then what you could do, for example, if you wanted to be somewhat crafty, you could go and generate a couple of mats or masks from this content, so that you have a foreground, middle ground, and background layer that you could work with. So for example, if we were just to add a solid and just mask that out. Like sort of, I don't know, blank out those things for some reason. Or replace them, whatever. And if we wanted to mask that or animate it over time, in fact, this is already interesting because you can kind of see what that's doing in here. So now you can see that 2D element sticks to the surface of your 360 comp because it's on a 3D edit. Back here, we can, like I said, do a quick mask effect. Again, you know After Effects, so, or most of you do. So this, not going into too much detail on how this is achieved, but I'm basically just duplicating the layer and sandwiching this in the middle. And for that, I just need a very rough mask. So I'm just going to go chick, cut it out like that. I know there's a shortcut for making that non-existent, but I can't think of it now. Normally I just do this, make it really tiny. Okay, clickety, click, 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 rough masking, click there, over there. That's going to be a better way. Okay, so yeah, just for illustrative purposes, I'm gonna just go here, block myself out here, and I'm just gonna ignore the table for now, just so that I have something in the foreground. And close the mask. Okay, so now essentially what I could do is over time animate elements that interact with the foreground and the background, or in between. Can have things, you know, like shapes circling it or moving, shadows moving, objects, characters, whatever layers you want to composite in between. You then have the option of doing so. So for this example, oopsie, just going to create a path and then, I don't know, just animate it. That's a lot of seconds. Animate the path to sort of get sucked into the world or the roof. You can see if I masked it better, it would actually look better as well. But now just experiencing that once again in VR, you'll kind of see that happening as if it's a 360 model. I think the 2D edit might just, where this is kind of like world space, you can see that it's bending. The 2D edit will make sure that this stays flat. So this is kind of like what you find in games, or game UI specific, where the one is screen space and the other one is world space. So 3D edit is world space and 2D edit is screen space. I heard a pling. Yes.
Is that VR Comp a plugin, maybe?
It's not in the latest. It should be standard in the latest version.
Okay, thank you.
It is an external script, or actually, I don't know if it's included or external script. I think it should be default by now. When it first came out, it used to be an external script. Okay, and the same rings true for 360 video, right? So if we went with the video over here, still basic, can say add 3D edit. We use the video composition this time. Then you kind of have a front-facing camera, so that's cool. That you can then deviate from by, once again, animating. I think that option where it says choose a null to operate the camera gives you this null controller, so that allows you to animate the camera independent of the camera itself. I feel like if you animated this, I don't know if that will retain in the metadata, because essentially you're rendering out a full 4K, you're rendering out something that looks very similar to the original footage. It's not like it's not like you have control over the camera in the end. So I think this is just why this additional camera controller is relative to the direction that the character is looking at. So the only time when it will be effective, sure, I don't actually know when that's actually even effective, is when you export a linear flattened footage version of your 360 content. So it's not an interactive export then at all. It doesn't go onto YouTube 360, for example. It'll just be what you see here. And then you can go crazy because you could obviously, you know, you could like, no, not the scale, but you could barrel roll the camera all the way, or you could do some really weird stuff in terms of the camera because it's not bound. There's no input from the player or the user. Okay, once you're done compositing, this will become harder to composite because it involves a bit of tracking now. So if you wanted to simply put something behind something else, it's infinitely more difficult to do so. And also, if we add anything, it'll be floating around like my face here. So if I added, let's say, Control Y, sorry, what did I do? Just do a blue dot for now. Okay. So now Let's do an experiment here. So 15 seconds later, this blue dot goes traveling down the middle. Okay, so that'll be kind of, we'll see what that does. That might be very lame. And then alternatively, we could also do something like this, enable 3D, and then also just, instead of animating the mask, just going to remove that animation. Actually animate the transform. So I'm going to just put this mask somewhere else, like here in the center, and see what the difference is between doing something like that or doing it in 3D. So now if we not scale it, but actually move it on the Z axis, so from there to there, and move it away from us, let's see what the effect is of this. 5%. Okay. And for the sake of this exercise, let's just make the one a different color. Oh yes, of course, the one. The one. Sorry. Let me try that again. Okay. It would make more sense this way around. Okay, let's see what that looks like in video. So here we're still looking at the one direction, and it is actually moving away from us. You could also use the same footage as a map to reflect back onto a sphere. There's some CC tools that does that, if that's something that you wanted to do. But the other sphere coming in from the side is kind of awkward. Let's see if we look at it from the side, if that sphere is actually moving in a 3D way. It's like it's not moving fast enough or far enough. And that one still remains kind of flat, just moving alongside. It's going to require a little bit of experimentation, I think. But locked off cameras work generally better. Okay. Moving on to something perhaps a little bit more comfortable with this medium, or maybe I'm just more comfortable with it in that format. I'm just gonna minimize this. Is of course Blender. So Blender is already 3D. It's already immersive. So it's sort of, it's a lot, you get a lot for free, okay? What you don't get for free are lights and cameras. So I'm going to just add those. This is actually a game scene from our virtual window game. So excuse it, it's not meant for this, not built for this purpose, but we'll add a sun just real quick. And doesn't really matter where that is. So we can get some lighting in here. Makes it look a little bit more realistic. Okay, and then we need a camera. Okay, so just placing the camera. The camera is in a weird collection now, but the camera needs to have a specific setting. So for it to work, you need to change, well, there's two things. You need to be in cycles. I think this is still a prerequisite. I tried it in Eevee and it doesn't give you the lens options on the camera then. It still gives you a panoramic option, but no way of actually interpreting this panoramic type. The moment, hopefully it's still coming, which means that you can render much faster. But for now, it only works in cycles. So if you then go to your lens, change it to panoramic, you have this option of rendering it in a specific type of panoramic. And these are actually the strange lens effects that you see in the Insta360 software application that we tried to explore earlier on. So the different types of ways that this renders it out is similar to that, where it either spherizes the entire world, or it's like there's a mirror ball render. Let's see, I don't think it'll show us just off the bat. So there's no viewport representation of this. You actually do need to go and render it. And then the other thing that you need to keep in mind is that whenever you're rendering in the actual correct format, which is equirectangular, you need to maintain that aspect ratio. So in your output settings, you need to make sure that that is 2:1. And I think, I don't have any presets here, but let's just go and say, what's it, 4K? What's the biggest one we have here? So that's not double, but if we want to render that, and then that divided by 2, to make sure that that's the right aspect ratio now, 24 frames per second. And we want to center, you normally want to get your camera original position as close as possible to a natural kind of eye level. Otherwise, it just seems like a weird perspective, or that you're some sort of being or creature, or have like a surveillance camera POV or something like that. So normally we just zero out this camera to like, I think it needs to be 90 degrees on X, 0, 0. Then position, I think the position is not bad. I think that's 4 meters. That might be a bit much. That was actually just from the center, so that's fine. Okay, so already we should, there you go. As soon as we switch to render, you see what it's rendering. That kind of looks strange at the moment, and we don't want that in there. And we probably want to include our alpha. So under here, but again, the animators will know what to do here. So probably want to render transparency if you want to replace the sky. And this vantage point is kind of like outside of the model. So I think in this instance, I will just move it closer, so we're more in the middle of it. And then we get a more interesting view of whatever is happening there. Cool. You can just go ahead and render this and treat it the same way as the footage that we imported into After Effects. It's also a nice way of rendering out HDRIs, because that same footage that I let me rather go about it the other way around. If I take an actual HDRI, so not any footage that I've generated, that's rendered in a similar way, except EXRs don't read so well in After Effects. I think you need to make a comp from it in any case. So then, oh, no, this one's picking up fine. Okay. You can do the same here. So add as 3D edit, add as 3D edit. And once again, we now have standard HDRI that can also be navigated as a 3D, well, as a VR immersive element. So if you rendered this in 3D, you could also, again, plug it into your world to light your 3D scene. So if we were to use this background plug-in, it should be, sorry, not background, but rather environment image. I'm not in the right place. Okay, that's shading, and that's HDRIs. You know how to add them. I don't want to take up too much more time on this. That's your basic workflow for generating 360 content straight from Blender. And obviously it works from After Effects and back to Blender again. The workflow is pretty standard. You can go and bring those HDRIs in as environmental textures, and vice versa. Okay. I did still want to have a little bit of time for a discussion, so I don't know if we can afford to take a break. I know Jared wanted to quickly run you through the Unity workflow. If you're ready.
I was muted. Sorry. Yeah, let's take a quick break.
Okay, cool.
Just Googling something.
All right. Okay, so let's make it, what, 10 minutes?
Yep.
Sure. Okay, so then back at 25 past. Oh, you can see me type this. Oh yeah, that's interesting. Skyboxes, you're right, Nantis. So you can totally use it for skyboxes as well. It's actually an option of editing it as a skybox or exporting it as a skybox from After Effects as well.
Yeah, because I was thinking like I could maybe make a cool Unity skybox, and I could use that as like my project if that would be appropriate.
Yeah, make new skyboxes.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah, you get assets on the Unity Asset Store that's just skyboxes.
Maybe I can do that as like a second asset pack.
Yeah, totally.
Is everybody back? It is time.
I have my mac and cheese and I am ready.
I had a quick answer for Scott that asked about the tail animation video. Scott, just make the default cat or wolf or whatever in Blender, and you'll sort of get an idea of how that rig is set up, because you should just be able to either swing the root bone or the to get that sort of tail effect. The rest is just animation as in any other type of animation.
There we go.
Oh, hello.
Yes, I am in VR today. I'm in virtual desktop, or a virtual desktop. Yeah, so I've got like infinite space. I can spin around and do things. It's actually pretty cool.
It's already hard enough to find a folder or a file.
Yeah, now it's behind you. Yeah, I've got Discord sitting off that side. Okay, let me try stream my screen here. Yes, I can't share exactly what I'm seeing in my headset, unfortunately, but I can stream the screen and that'll give somewhat of the same effect. At least you'll see me waving around over here.
Mhm.
Okay, so I'm going to run you through the process of just getting started with VR in Unity. They've made it like really, really easy to actually do that nowadays. So it's going to take like all of 5 or 10 minutes, and then I get to show you the cool features that they've got included. So step one, make sure you've got Unity installed. And if you are deploying to an Oculus Quest like this one, or the ones that we have on campus, you'll also need the Android support. So if anyone is interested in doing this that hasn't touched Unity before, you'll need a Unity Hub. You can just download that from the Unity website. And then you can go install editor. And then under the official releases, just take the latest LTS version. And I'll just use this one as an example here quick. So over here, you can just tick the platforms and make sure those 3 are selected, and then continue and let that install. Oculus Quest, these devices are Android devices. So if you want to build something to run on the device directly, then it will need to be an Android development. Otherwise, the other option is to AirLink it or Oculus Link it, like what I'm doing right now, is it connects to your PC. But you have to have a pretty beefy PC to run that, or a pretty beefy graphics card to stream directly from the computer to the headset. So you can also do that. In any case, we can go and create a new project. And we have a couple templates over here. You'll see the first time they'll be grayed out like that. You'll just have to download it. And then once you've got it, you want the VR template over here. And then you can just go and we can give it a little bit of a name. This must look very strange in the video feed. There we go. Okay, create a project. Should open up, shouldn't take too long for that.
It looks like you're not paying attention. Jared, get out of those VR goggles. Get
I'm
back.
going to need them in 2 minutes, so I'm not going to take them off now. It's a mission going on and off. just
remember-
installing all the required packages there.
Oh, I remember Unity saying something about booting up faster
Mm.
in the latest set of promises.
Yeah, it's just taking care of all the hassle of installing the correct packages and all the setup and stuff. Sorry, I thought this would take quicker. I'm going to open this other one and see which one opens first.
That sounds like a bad idea. It's like when you're copying something, it's taking too long to copy, and then you're like, what if I just start this other thing copying as well? Get that going so long. And then both come to a complete standstill.
Ah, that one's doing stuff.
So maybe while you're doing that, I'm just going to paste a link in the chat there. I did mention it to some of the animation students in the class earlier. It's an event that's run by Chocolate Tribe. You might recognize some of the people from the professional practice session that we had. Nosipa from Chocolate Tribe came to chat to us about how to conduct yourself in an interview or prepare for the industry. But this is more of a sort of a hands-on event filled with animation, VFX, and immersive content and chats. We're also exhibiting there. So it might be a cool platform for you to exhibit some of your stuff. If we get any cool work out of this exercise, then we'll definitely showcase it there as well. It's an awesome platform for networking and just exposure in general. So mark it on your calendars. It's towards the end of September. It's about 50 days from now, a little bit more. And yeah, keep it in mind if you're doing any exciting VR stuff. We'd definitely like to see it and showcase it. Cool. Okay, you're up.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so this is what you're greeted with, the little template description over here. There's a whole quick start guide if this is all new to you, so you're welcome to go check that. But what it does mention here that's quite important is you've got to go open up the project settings and enable the correct XR plugin. So because so XR is this kind of global integration that supports all different headsets. VR and AR. It's trying to sort of democratize the inputs and the outputs so that developers like us can actually just make the game once and not have to worry about integrating it 6 different ways for all the different headsets. So under project settings over here and under XR plugin management, you can see there's a few different options. We're going to turn off OpenXR there. That is for Vive and a couple other different headsets. That's like an open platform as well. We're going to use Oculus specifically for the Quest. So just turn that on. Easy peasy. In the past, this used to be a pain. You had to go download all the SDKs, import them, set those up. That is all you have to do now. And we can just hit the big play button. And it's going to put my headset straight into game mode. Hopefully, yes, there we go. Okay. You're probably seeing the tiny little game window there. Is it big enough? Can you see things? Yeah, okay, fine. Maybe I'll make it bigger quick. There we go. Okay, so you can see my little controllers over here. Got some very cool little markers on them. Very nice. And then there's a little description over here. So UI interactions as well. So you can just point and click at things. So that's the one form of interaction is pointing and then clicking with the trigger. The other one is like there you can see it sort of snaps onto that window there. Then if you click with the grip, you can drag things around, move them around, and then with the analog stick, you can move them back and forth in distance as well. And then with some of the objects, they have another interaction with the left and the right. Like over here, we can rotate things. So we can bring it in, we can rotate it, so we can send it up there and drop it on top of the wall. And we've got physics as well, so we can smack things around. We can also make things bigger and smaller, like a pinch to drag, pinch and zoom sort of thing. And we can throw that, and it's on the roof. There we've got little sliders and buttons and other UI information. Can also just drag this one and put it wherever we want it. This one has another interaction. When you press the trigger button, shoots confetti. So we can throw that around. And we can also move by pushing in the analog stick and moving around with the little waypoint movement. And we can use the left and right analog to also just shift our view 90 degrees at a time. The reason it's like snapping 90 degrees at a time is for motion sickness, because constant movement creates a lot of motion sickness. My headset is low. Great. And there's that. Oh, yeah, no, we lost the ball. And there's some other interactions, like these ones are constrained interactions. So you can interact with it in a particular way. Same as this one here, you can rotate it. And not that one. There's videos, you can play videos or watch videos there. There's my ball all the way down there. Point is, Unity has gone and created this really nice template with all sorts of interactions that are quite plug and play. And for someone who doesn't have any development experience, you can get simple interactions going fairly simply and easily now as well. So do consider messing around with it. Even if you just put your 3D objects or 2D objects around in a 3D scene and just use this template as sort of a viewer for your content. Then start simply, add a little sound over there, add a little sound behind you, start creating an atmosphere, mood, play with the lighting. Just start creating an immersive environment and see what you can learn from just interacting in a 3D space like this. where you've got access to 360 degrees of interaction. Yeah, it's very simple. There's not much more to say about it right now.
Obviously, the frame rate that we're seeing is not nearly.
Oh, that's Meet. Meet is 15 frames a second when you're streaming your screen.
Okay.
So no, it is full 90 something frames a second.
Okay, so still good performance as well. Well, that's your graphics card's performance, actually.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. So you
Definitely.
do have to just consider like graphic fidelity if you're building to the Oculus. It is essentially still an Android device, high-end device, but Barrett's eating his mic.
Sorry, I was trying to take this headset off.
Yeah, so you can't like just go and throw a bunch of Quixel assets on it and spread it around your scene. You are still going to have to optimize a bit. But yeah, that's sort of it. I was hoping that we just get a chance for everyone to give us some insight into what they have in mind or any ideas, but I don't think we have time for everyone to talk us through it. So just any volunteers that just share your ideas so that we can kind of like get your head around what you thinking of. Alexi?
So I've been going back and forward trying to figure out how to make something like interactive, and I kind of settled on the idea of making a 360 YouTube video of one of my projects, my motion design projects.
Okay.
I'm stuck between like choosing the PSA or something like that, but I'm thinking about modeling like a cinema chair where the viewer is going to be, and then just having them rooted there, and like they can like look around, and I can play with like the direction of where the action is taking place.
Sure. I have seen, where did I see the cinema chair thing being used? There was a viewing room type thing. Was it the Netflix app or something like that, where they, on Oculus, where they actually put you in a cinema and then show you the video in front of you?
Yeah,
So
there's a
it's-
few of them, but I can't remember what they're called.
Yeah, it's kind of cool recreating that cinematic effect. Sorry, you're gonna have to excuse me for 2 minutes. I just need to fetch something from the door. Please do continue, though.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't know where that conversation was going. Anyone else have ideas they want to talk about? Go for it.
So I also take motion, and we have motion for 3D, and we're using Cinema 4D. And I found this Adobe Aero, which is augmented reality. So I was gonna try and put the room in augmented reality.
Okay, yeah, that sounds like a cool idea.
So yeah.
How do you want to present your content? Just like in front of you, or do you want to actually have it around you?
I was thinking of just having it in front of me, but now because of like all the VR that you guys keep showing, I'm thinking maybe making it larger.
What
See
is
how
your
that goes.
scene, your 3D scene?
It's just a bedroom.
A bedroom, okay.
Yeah, and I said
Interior
actually,
or exterior? Interior.
interior, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that could work in 3D, in VR. Could be quite cool seeing all the different parts being created around you.
personally, I haven't used Aero before. I think at some point Kevin used it for one of the staff exhibitions to bring depth to a PSD. So you could also lay out the PSD, and I think you can use the PSD as or the printed version of the PSD as a tracker as well. So then you can have a printed version of an image, and then when you point your camera at it, it activates the digital version and overlays all the layers and stuff. So you've got this cool way of activating printed artworks using Aero. From what I understood, like I said, I don't have any experience with it personally, but it does look like a cool tool for designers. Alistair, I think you mentioned something about VR chat last week.
Yes, indeed. So my plan is to recreate a scene of my game, Project Eden, in a 3D space, and basically use VR chat as my medium to design that. So it's also, everything is basically made in Unity, similar to everything that we've done so far. And I just want to kind of create this scene, right? This big scape that employs some just 3D models, textures, all of that, just to give the viewer the sense of scale that I'm hoping to achieve in the game itself. Kind of give them a comparison of how small the player actually is compared to Eden. And just, it's not going to be anything major, just mostly a flat platform, and then this scene of Eden in front of them that's quite massive in comparison. They can move around a little bit.
So that allows you to kind of experience the assets in real time, similar to what a Unity build would do.
Yes.
Whereas the Blender route, like building your assets in Blender and then rendering them out, kind of flattens them. So it still allows you to navigate them, but not in a 3D space. I think that's sort of just a key differentiation to make between the two approaches.
So one of the things I'm kind of hoping to employ, but I don't know whether this will. Hold on. Excuse me, my phone just went off. One of the things I'm kind of hoping to employ is the 3D painting, if that makes sense, to try and construct these models, still to give it that feel, right? So you can kind of, I want to design Eden by painting it in 3D, kind of like by drawing it like that, and then just exporting it to a larger scale and having it display in VR chat. Don't know if that's feasible, but I want to try.
You want to try and paint it using 3D tools as well?
Maybe that might be a bit out of scope, but it seems that I might be able to get the effect that I want to achieve rather than kind of like making it in like Blender or trying to compose a 2D image in 3D space. I don't know if that'll work.
Depends on it depends on the way. Can you export models from Tilt Brush to anything else?
That's the thing. I don't have the foggiest clue. I still need to check all of that up.
Okay.
But it is my hope that I can kind of like to export it as a model and then just put that in VR chat for the viewer then to look at. Yeah.
You can export your Tilt Brush videos straight to YouTube. Oh, you can export it as a FBX. Okay, that's great.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, no, 100%. Then I'm all set. So my plan is to kind of like to then basically reconstruct Eden in Tilt Brush, and then kind of, you know, like sculpt it like that using that Painterly method. I've always wanted to try that out, and I have my Oculus here, so I can play around with that. But just reconstruct it in that, and just use that then to design a scene that the player can kind of walk around in. And that's my plan. Oh,
Interesting.
Sounds cool.
yay! Thank you.
Quentin, do you want to film that, or do you want to recreate it in 3D? Okay. You can use the headsets from school to test. So you can, and I don't know if you can test without a headset though. Is there a headless camera in Unity?
A simulator, I don't know.
Okay.
There might be. I'm not sure.
Alexi?
I just want to make sure this is due next term, like the end of year, right?
It's only due for your portfolio, but like I said, the AV Josie gives us a good platform. If there's any content that you have in mind, or that you want to produce earlier and sort of get that exposure.
Oh, okay.
And then we said that we'll do a sort of a progress hand in just for feedback and support at the end of the term, but that's not for marks. So you'll only get evaluated from on this during your portfolio evaluations.
Okay, thank you. Just making sure.
Cool. Yeah, and Martin, you can use anything. It doesn't have to be from your major. You can use new content or existing content and assets. It's just for you to experience interfacing in the medium, navigating it, thinking, starting to like think in this sort of immersive content way, you know, like everything is always visible. The users at the helm, they're steering the interaction, all of those things. It really changes the way that we were used to making entertainment media in general. So I think just experiencing it and doing it as an exercise already gets the cogs going, you know. Cool. So Daniel, maybe that traversal component in Unity would be useful to you to see, you know, what is it using and how does it work with the parameters that you've given it. Shireen, you should have an end-year portfolio of some sorts if you're a final year student, unless you've only got modules left, which would be...
Sorry, I have my majors next year. I finish my major next year.
Okay, well then you'll only have to present it next year.
Okay, so I don't have to do any of this then.
Not really.
Okay.
But better to do it now while it's still fresh.
Otherwise, you're gonna forget about it.
Otherwise, you're gonna forget about it.
Yeah.
And then you're not gonna have any content in your portfolio when you do present it. So, yeah.
Yeah, that might be hard then to try and do it next year as well.
Yeah, I think try something, and yeah, you can always improve it for next year's portfolio if you don't get it right. There was a way that you could interface with Blender using VR as well, but I don't know what benefit that would have. to the
Unless you can sculpt in VR, because that would be cool.
You can, but it just means that you're like sort of in the middle of your sculpt. You're just like it's on you. It's very messy. I got sculpt all over me.
If I can say, what me and my sister want to try and do is do like a horror scene inspired by Silent Hill in like VR. Would something like that work, or would you advise against trying to do like horror stuff?
No, thematically, there's no restriction.
Okay,
It's fine.
that sounds good. Thank you.
So that Character Animation Studio or Adobe Character Animator also uses AR tech to animate and face track. So there's a bunch of AR face tracking and motion capture type solutions. The one that comes with the Cinema 4D or Maxon 1 is called Moves. Then there's Live Link Face from Unreal. There's a bunch of photogrammetry applications like Trinio and Scandy and Reality Scan, and Polycam and PhotoCatch and all those that also uses AR tech to scan objects. But it's not necessarily very immersive then, not the way, it's more like the methodology or AR technology is being used to generate this content. It's not necessarily used to experience the content afterwards. Palesa?
Hi, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So my partner and I were thinking of doing like a 360 like YouTube video, and since we both do 3D, we were thinking of like going into Blender and making like a small environment where everything is like in a toon shader or a claymation shader to make it feel like you're in a cartoon. Is
Okay.
that okay?
Yeah, that sounds nice.
Cool. We just had one question. Do we need to have like a narrative, or just looking around is also fine?
Just looking around is also fine. But it would be nice if there's elements that could direct the player, even if they don't strictly have to be narrative, but thinking about how one leads the player through your environment.
Okay.
So even if there's just an object that maneuvers through your environment so that one could follow it and look at it as it maneuvers or as it moves, that's already some form of suggested narrative.
Okay. We'll look into that. Thank you.
Cool. All right, everyone. That seems to be it for today. Please remember, next week's on campus. Do try and make it, please. We're gonna have you experience all these fun tools, IRL.
How late and where is it going to be on campus?
Same time as the class, and it's going to be in B4, the Game and Animation Studio, but we might be a lot of people, so we'll branch out into the atrium and the sort of the exterior surrounding the studio.
Okay, awesome.
Cool. Sure, Megan. I'll stick around. Scott?
Can I quickly ask you a question after class?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, sweet.
Bye.
What are we going to be doing on campus? Like, what do we need
So
to have or whatever?
just bring your mobile phone. I think that might be useful, but otherwise the cameras will be there, the VR headsets will be there, and then we'll just demo some of the software and things like more hands-on. Hi.
Um,
Okay.
yeah, I just wanted to ask about my situation because they did explain that I have to come in on the last hour.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, then join us in the last hour. That'll be fine.
Okay, just making sure.
I'll record the first session of the class.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Stefan.
Hi.
So first off, I think just to actually show that I am also paying attention to this class, or Scott, do you want to maybe go first because I want to also ask about the trailer for 3D?
No, you can go first. I have like some things I need to show.
I
So you
also
can
have
go.
things I need to try and show. But what I want to do for this project is create an environment and then use the little mini monsters, especially because I started making the like cuter mini monsters and having like 3 separate little places that you can go and look and find them, and
Yeah.
they're busy doing something.
Okay. Cool.
But yeah, I need to think more about what
Do you
exactly
want
they're doing. And
do you want to sort of make it interactive or just timed in a way that they would sort of reveal themselves and come out? Or because you could use that attic scene quite nicely.
that's
as-
kind of what I want to, with that attic scene, having the big monster, that growing thing, or having it be a case where you can still kind of look around, but you're kind of running through the attic. So the camera is just moving and or the node is just moving and you can look around and you're being chased or you're being dragged along by one of the little teddies. That was the other part of it, but I don't know which one I want to go for.
I think either is a worthy challenge. I think like I immediately thought of like this type of game where you're standing in the attic and you have to like kind of hungry hippo bash all the the little characters on their head for them to go away or something like that.
It would be quite cool.
Because you've got that hammer thing, but you're going to need to pair up with a
game student.
To help you with the interactivity then.
Most definitely. But yeah, because then the other thing I also just wanted to ask was about the trailer for the 3D Major, but that's why I said, Scott, if you want to go first.
I can give you
No, I'm good.
Sort of a quick like an overall response. I don't know if I can give you any specific feedback, but yesterday I added shot numbers while I was going through it, and I noticed that there are quite a lot of shots. So there's a lot of very short shots. It's a quick edit, so that's fine. But I couldn't really, from what footage it had in it, I couldn't really tell which shots are linked to other shots or what the exact content of that shot is. So I might have added more sequences than was necessary. Some of those panels might flow better into each other than what I suggested. But I also thought the way that I broke it up makes for good digestible chunks of animation. So even if if it doesn't necessarily make sense in terms of a sequence, like maybe it all takes part in the same space, it would still make sense in terms of workload to say like, that sequence that I've identified contains more action sequences. So maybe that's meant for a stronger animator and more kind of atmospheric, less demanding animation sequences could be given to the less inclined to animate people on the team. But then also, having said all of that, I think you would actually know better within the team who did that sequence and who should do that sequence. So I think the assignment of those sequences should still at least originate within the team. Because if you're going to wait for me, then I need to almost go back to the original files and see who did the animation, and then bring it back and assign it, and then still divvy up the leftovers. So I think that might be way more effective for the team to just meet real quick and say, oh, that was my sequence, I'll still do that one. And then just kind of like add the shots to the animators that want to do them. Oh, she's gone. Okay, well, that settles that then.
Easy peasy.
Scott, what are you up to?
I just want to share my screen because I want like feedback on my. I want to call it blocking because I haven't started splining yet, and I haven't animated the tail. That's why I was asking for tail reference.
Is this your dragon?
Yeah, my VFX thing.
Okay.
I don't know how good it's gonna play in Google Meet, but oh, it didn't even. There we go. Yeah, it's pretty bad in the Meet.
Do you get a reference for your character movement and behavior?
Yeah, I got like bears and cats and minks to get the movements.
Yeah. And then literally analyze the movement of the tail. Like, look at the keyframes that it makes, like the clear change in direction and when it occurs and what the tail is supposed to do afterwards, because the tail normally has a follow through. So if you identify the keyframes where the tail is at and then move to the next keyframe, then you can kind of base the follow through of the tail on the overall movement of the keyframes, between the keyframes, if that makes any sense. There is something in this week's class that I'm going to mention in terms of references and timing and spacing and working with animation in general that I think would be helpful. And I'm most likely going to be present in your VFX class this week as well. So I think maybe we can, just have a closer look at your reference. The only way that I can effectively give you feedback on that is if you export something and then I draw on it, because I don't think I can talk you through it.
Yeah, it's also like hard to see because I'm looking on the Meet and it's like 2 frames on the Meet.
Yeah, so you're welcome to export it and then send it to me, and I can do a crit on it. But also, when you do that, just share your references with me, because then I can refer to that. It's easier than having to source my own.
So would you prefer like email it to you or just wait for the VFX when I still polish it out some more?
I think have another go at it. Look closer at your video references, and then after Thursday's animation class, I'll see you in the VFX class, and then we can have a more, I think, in-depth discussion about it. Probably.
Yeah. Because like based on the reference that I've seen and like in my mind, like when this leg goes up, then the base of the tail. Like I don't know if it was like opposite.
It's to balance, yeah, to counter it.
It was like opposite, but like these 2 parts were like lagging behind because of the follow through.
So
like this part would move first.
Yeah, there's all of these references that I'm sharing with the animators this week, and then we're looking at a few of them. But that's the entire Animator Survival Kits DVD set. And if you go to, I think you find what you're looking for round about video number 7. So sneaks, runs, and animal actions. Then flexibility, and there's also one on overlapping actions and weight. Those 3 clips specifically will be very informative.
Okay,
You see-
sweet.
seeing what
Yeah,
I'm-
I'm looking at the video now.
Okay. So just bookmark or keep that link handy, and then you can go and check out those videos in your own time. I think they definitely help.
Yeah, I did use the kit to see like all the weight stuff, like this leg touches, then the weight will go up here, down there. But the tail was like killing me. I don't know why it wasn't working properly.
All right, Scott. Good luck with that, though. We'll chat again soon.
Okay, thanks for the feedback.
Cool.
Enjoy.
Bye. Ron, are you there? Doesn't seem like it.